AB invoice approval process. Welcome to my channel. I will talk about how to configure AB invoice approval for Oracle Cloud. So let's start. How invoices are approved. You can configure predefined workflows to manage invoice approvals. When the invoice approval process starts, workflow builds the list of approvals based on the defined rules. Approval notifications are sent to the first set of approvals on the list. When the approvals respond, notifications are sent to the next set of approvals. This process repeats until all approvals are complete. As all of us know that we can enable the approval for AB invoice to manage invoice approvals. So this is based on workflow rules you will define. The approval notification will be sent to the first approval, then second approval, until the approvals or all approvals are take actions and completed the process. Approvals can respond from the email notification, work list notification page, invoices landing page, or edit invoice page. Approval flow. As to know what is approval flow for the AB invoice approvals, you have first to enable invoice approval. This is from manage invoice options. There is one you can select the proper business units. After that you can allow the approvals. After some seconds we can see the setup steps. After that you have to enter enter invoices, but before enter invoices, once you allow the invoice approval, you have to define your workflow rules to manage the conditions, business units, the approvals, whatever. After that you start to enter the invoices. That you can create invoices, either import invoice, imaging, spreadsheet, or manual entry invoice. Then submit the invoice for the approvals. That to initiate the approval invoice action or schedule the initiate invoice approval workflow to run on regular basis. After that, approval invoice document to respond to the approval notification for the invoice. So first of thing, you have to enable invoice approval. Just let's get into the application. Once you log in, as all of us know, that you have to go to setup and maintenance and search for manage invoice option, or you just write invoice, manage invoice options. Here is the scopes, which business units you are going to, for example, allow or enable the invoice approval. Select the proper business unit, then click on manage invoice options. Once you go to down, there is one area for approval. You have to enable invoice approval. After that, there are two other options. That are you going to allow force approval? Allow force approval, like allow manually approval without going for the workflow rule defined, like manual approval. You can allow. Also, you can require validation that all of us know that once you complete the invoice, you have to make a validate. After validate, if you enable the approval, you have to submit it for approval. After that, you can make a create accounting. Here the system asks you, are you require validation before approval? That once the users enter the invoice, he must validate the invoice before submit it for approval. This is based on your business requirement. After that you can account regardless of approval status, require accounting before approval to create accounting, or require approval before accounting. So this also depends on your requirement that some of organization needs accounting before approval, some of them need approval before accounting, to ensure that everything is okay, distribution is okay, amounts, supplier sites, bank accounts, all of these things, so you can check or select whatever you want. And this is it's risky, because this is, you have to give, once you allow this checkbox, it means that you give the users to allow manually approved the invoice without any approvals or without any follow the predefined workflow rules for AB invoice rules. But you can also allow these options and make through sandbox or whatever to give it to specific managers or supervisor levels. It's like allow manual invoice approval. In such cases that you can, the invoice is stuck in pending, in hold, whatever, so allow force approvals to make a manual approval for invoice just for specific cases if it's stuck or whatever. Once you select your options, you can save and close. After that, later you can come again and you can disable, because as you know, this like checkbox enable, disable depends on the business cases. So I will save and close, and as you see here, our business units. So now I saved the, let's come back to our slides. How you can create invoice approval rules using a spreadsheet. You can create approval rules using a spreadsheet. There are some things to keep in mind. Each spreadsheet or template contains sample data that you can refer to when creating your approval rules. Let's get into applications. Just make manage invoice approval or just work flow. Manage payable workflow rules, just click on it. You will find invoice approvals. As you know that spreadsheets approval workflows is enabled also for GL general ledger, for journals, and for fixed assets. Either you select specific, like here, manage payable workflow rules, or you can come back to search for manage workflow rules. It will give you invoice approval, general ledger journals, and fixed assets. Here, as you see that each spreadsheet or template, you can here download the template. It's first, if it's the first time for you to define the workflow rules for AB invoice payables, you first try to download. After that, later, if you already downloaded before, you can come here to download it again and make some updates and again upload. So by the way, you have to download, enter your workflow rules, try to upload, check the status here, it is succeeded, error, whatever. After that, you can, once it's successful, the status ends with successfuls, you can come back to the AB invoice to start to make or to start to check the result of your setup. So once you try to download here, it will give you a lot of options that As you see here, there are a lot of templates. Each spreadsheet or templates contain sample data that you can refer to when creating your approval rules. The template provides example of use cases that you can use to modify or create your own approval rules. For these 4 or spreadsheets, there are invoice approval basic template, invoice approval sample template 1, template 2, template 3. For example, that for the template 1, this contains sample rules required to enforce the following approval policy. Each business unit rule from the approval policy here is represented in one block in the template. There is invoice request approvals, business rules that all invoice requests require approval by the invoice header level requester. The invoice approval business rules that all invoices that aren't matched to a purchase order require supervisor approvals, and the business rule 2 that all invoices with an invoice amount greater than or equal, for example 5,000 USD, require approval by the finance approval group. For the sample 2 or sample 2, this template also contains sample rules required to enforce the following approval policy. Each business rules from the approval policy is represented in one block in the template. Invoice again in request approval, the business rule all invoice requests require approval by invoice header level request. Business rule 1, business rule 2, business rule 1, all invoice for a particular business unit and with specific distribution account segment values require approvals. Business rule 2 that all invoices that have project information about that require approval by the project manager. Sample 3 also, this is template also again contains sample rules required. That business rule 1 that all invoice for a specific business source require approval by supervisor hierarchy. That invoice from certain invoice source requires approved by a specific approval group. Business rule 2 that all invoices for assets purchases for a specific cost center with invoice amount, for example more than a specific amount, require approval by the cost center managers. This is like a template or a sample. So as you see here that everyone, the description for each template, it's just to, if your business case matches like sample or business rules in invoice approval sample template 1, you can download this one. If your business requirement matched like these business rules here in approval sample template 2, you can download, and so on. For the basic, you have to download the invoice approval basic template. So I will try to download. It will download like Excel sheet. You have to go to properties, unblock, and try to again open the Excel sheets and start to define your workflow rules. So I will go to the folder, just right click, properties, unblock, apply, OK, and open it. Some points to consider here that when you generate the rule file for the template, the rules for both invoice approval request approval rules and invoice approval rules are included. You must define rules in at one or both worksheet, the invoice request approval or invoice approval to successfully generate the rule files. Otherwise, the file isn't generated without rules. Each new successful rule file uploaded overwrites all the existing rules for the workflow. This feature is only available for the payable invoice approval workflow for payables. You must use Oracle Business Process Management as BPM to define rules for the other payables workflows. Invoice request approval rules can only be used to define approval rules for supplier portal invoices. If you ask what is the difference between invoice request approval rules and invoice approval rules, that invoice request approval rules can be used only to define approval rules for supplier portal invoice. You must use the invoice approval rules worksheet, this one, for all other invoice types such as standard invoice, debit memo invoice, credit memo invoice, prepayment invoice, etc. So in case of you are going to define approval for supplier portal, you have to define the rules here. In case of you define that for standard invoice, debit memo, credit memo, prepayment, our normal or our standard invoice types, you have to define invoice approval rules. Again, you have to define at least either this or this. Without both, the file will be failed. So this is our the dataset. Also, this dataset, the list of values for varying attributes column contain selected lists of attributes you can use to create your own dataset. A dataset enables you to define mapping between your data and the variation in approvals based on such data. If you go to, for example, this template, you will find a sample data. It's like a reference for you to how to define the approvals workflow rules. Here, what is the rule descriptions that you have to enter? What is the rule descriptions? What is the supporting or approval routing? It is a group in serial, group in parallel, first responder. It's by user, by your rule. It will be auto approve without any approving. Sorry. So which type of approval routing are you going to set up this AB invoice approval? So again, it depends on the business requirement. Some of them, it's like by specific users, by specific rules. I will follow the supervisor hierarchy. I will make a group in serial, a group in parallel, whatever, a first responder. So I have to define the approval group to path it here, or I will follow the supervisor hierarchy. I will select supervisor hierarchy. What is the approval level? This is, as you see here, that level to which the approval is sent. This is required for rules with an approval routing of supervisor hierarchy. Here, start approval. What is the approval, or what is the first or the start approval point? Some of them, they said that manager of invoice creator, that if I the invoice creator, so my manager will be the start approval. Manager of invoice line requester. What is a requester? If you bought the requester for the invoice line. Manager for invoice submitter. As you know that I can create the invoice, but someone else can submit the invoice. So I can put here that whatever the submitter, the approval, or the manager of the submitter will be the start approval, and so on. So I will select manage of invoice creator. What is the top approval? That this is the last possible approval in the list. This is like for your informations that this invoice approval is completed by successfully, by error, whatever. So this is the top approvals. Group or user or rule. In case of you select here the routing, either group in serial, parallel, group, whatever the group, the system will ask you to pass the group name. As we said that in PPM you have to define the approval group there. This approval group, you can put a list of approvals. So once you select a group here, you have to pass the approval group name. Also the same case in the users or rules. If you approval routing is by users and you put or select user here, you have to pass here the username as the username defined in Oracle Fusion. The rule, the same. Once you select rule, you have to pass the same or the exact rule name which is defined in Oracle Fusion. After that, you will start to make a conditions. Here rule priority, it's medium, high, low, whatever. Here we have rule condition on 3 levels: header, line, distributions. For any invoice we have 3 levels: header invoice, line invoice, and after line distributions. So which conditions you select to build it in rule conditions. For the invoice headers there are a lot of attributes: business unit name, in case of you have a lot of business units, and do you allow or enable the invoice approval for all of them. So you can come here to build approval based on business unit name. Invoice amount, like this case, that in case of the invoice amount of the invoice more than 1000, it will be go to approval. Rule evaluation currency. Invoice type, you can select the invoice type. If the system finds this invoice type, so the approval will be enabled. If this invoice type, so the auto approval rule will be triggered, means that there is no approval for this invoice type. Invoice source, requester name, BO matched. You can build rules based on invoice matched, invoice not matched. Once you select this invoice matched, the system will ask you, is it yes or no? Yes. So for yes means that for I am configure invoice approval for matching invoice only. If you select no, so I am configure approvals or approval workflow rules for only non-invoice matching. Are you going to build on by group created by specific users, legal entity, invoice currency code, supplier type? All of these attributes is there, so you can select whatever you want. In case if you go to invoice line conditions and without invoice header, just come here to select. Again, there are a lot of attributes: amount, invoice line type, is it freight, is it miscellaneous, is it item. Again, is this line matched or not matched? What is the match type? Requester name, cost center segment, balancing segment. All of this is a lot of options here for invoice line, header, and distribution. If you go to invoice distributions, again, what is the cost center, account segment, balancing segment, amount, matched, not matched, line type, project, blah blah blah, a lot of attributes. But here there is one case that in case of I make like this, that if in case of the invoice amount more than or equal 1000, it must go to for supervisory hierarchy. The system or the Oracle tell you that in case of you make like these conditions, you have to make another conditions to cover other cases. For example, you put it here more than or equal 1000. But in case of the invoice created or the invoice amount of the invoice created is less than 1000, so what is the system or what is the workflow status will be there? So in case of I select or updated condition here for more than, I have to add another line for less than. So for the less than, I will create to tell the system that auto approve rules without any approval or workflow rules. So for example, I will put my user here. Okay, so either header or line or distribution. Here for block, that in case of your business requirement, in which case you will add a block. Add a block means that if my invoice approval business case, like first of all that supervisor, after supervisory take action like approve or reject or whatever, it must go to a group of approvals, for example for 3 persons. After that it will go to for CEO or CFO or whatever, or finance manager. So this is block 1. this will be block 2, this will be block 3 in the same rules. So you have to come back here to add block, and this add block you can enter, for example, approval, a group of approvals, and put the approvals as here. You can select the same whatever, and here you have to enter here to select the group in serial or parallel. Once you put here the groups, the system will ask you to to pass the approval group name, which you defined in BPM, and which is included your 3 approvals, and add a third block, which is the finals, to put it the finance manager. In this case, the finance manager will be user, right? So in this case, you will select approval routing here, users. So in the users, the system will ask you to pass the users. You can pass the finance manager username, exact the name defined in Oracle Fusion. So this is the blocks. If your workflow rules, it will go to for 3 levels of approvals. And the first one is the supervisory of invoice creator or invoice submitters. After that, you will send it for another group, for example, a group of approval. So you have to add another block as a block 2. This is for either group in serial, group in parallel, or first response. After that, you will add a third block for the last level or last person or last approvals in the hierarchy. So you will post for specific, add another or a third block to enter invoice routing or approval routing for invoice, either by user or group or whatever. This is the definition or the meaningful of the block or the benefits. So here, just check everything and approval. For the invoice requesters, you can either delete or whatever. To tell the system that I will not define any rule for the supplier portal invoice request approval. And the data set also, if you have any sample data here or sample example, you can delete it. Once you defined and you can check everything, just go to instructions to generate rule file. Just like to rename the file you downloaded, because you downloaded by the standard name as template 1, basic template, sample template 1, sample template 2. So once you downloaded or whatever, you have to change the name to, for example, your organization approval name 1, approval rule 2, whatever. After that, you try to generate a rule file. Here the rule file is saved in path like this. So just come back to our manage workflow rules. Try to upload the zip file which you generated before. Just click on upload. System will ask you to select the zip file to upload it and check the status here in the upload history. Come here to upload, select file. For download, select the zip file, okay, submit. The rule created, okay. Just like confirmation messages that will be overwrite, because we said once you upload whatever, it will overwrite all of the existing workflow rules. Here in progress, just try to refresh to check the status, either error or succeeded or successful or whatever. And also if it gets you error, you can click on error to check the error message. As you see here, it's successful, and here خلاص it's finished. That you can click on done. Succeeded means that your rule defined in the invoice approval basic template is uploaded successfully without any errors. After that, you can come back to the AB invoice to start to create invoice. Select the proper business unit as the same in enabled before we enable the invoice approval for specific business units. So here I can come to select again the same business units to create invoice and check the approval. The business units, we select this one and select the supplier, whatever, any supplier. What is the name? Invoice approval 1. Here, what is the amount condition? Lines. What is distribution combination? Select the specific account, sub account, whatever the segments. Okay, and save. After that, go to validate. Once it's validated, the status, you can follow the status here. If you click on the validated, you will find that the approval is required. This is before of what? Before you enabled the allows approval for invoice approval for the specific business units, and you also defined. In some cases, if you enabled and without defined any workflow rules, the approval status will be rejected once it's submitted for approval. It's validated, so still unaccounted. You can come here to make a submit. Once you select approval, there are a lot of options. Initiate means that initiate the approval. Withdraw, in case of you initiated and you forget something like attachment, the amount is wrong, whatever, you can withdraw, make your updates, and again not initiate, just resubmit. Initiate, this is the first time to initiate the approval. Withdraw, once you initiate, and again you need like roll back to make some adjustment. Once you withdraw, make your adjustment. Again, if you need to reinitiate, don't click on initiate. You have to click on resubmit. This is the second time. Hold, it means hold. Force approvals as like before, like manually approval. So through sandbox tools, you can exclude these options from the specific users and assign to specific users, either based on rules, based on users, whatever. Resubmit means resubmit. Approve, like take actions like approve, because we said that one of options to approve the invoice through user interface like here, and take either approve or reject. So I will make initiate. Initiate means that start the approvals. It must go to the supervisor. It must follow the workflow rules which you defined in the spreadsheet. Once you come back to validated, the status must be initiated. Initiated means it's go for the approvals rules which you defined in manage approval, AB invoice approval workflows. Again, in case of I need to make some adjustment, just invoice action, approval, withdraw. Withdraw, the status must be changed from initiated to withdrawn. Withdrawn. Here again the invoice is reopened, right? You can adjust the amount, whatever, and again come back here, invoice approval, not initiate. If you click on initiate, just try to save. Approval, initiate. It's not applicable. Why? So in this case, you can come back and approval and resubmit. Once you resubmitted, just try to save first and come back to resubmit. Come back to here, it will be initiated again. This is the means before resubmit. Initiated means that it gone for example, in our example is to our supervisor. So supervisor of what? We put it for creator. So the creator, my username, supervisory, it went to him. Until he approved, you can come back here to take action for the approval, to post or whatever. This depends on the options you selected for allow approval before creating account or allow creating an account before approval. Let's come back to our slides. So this is by the end, this is depends on what is your business requirement. Are you going to build the conditions on invoice header, invoice line, invoice distributions? Is it for example, invoice matching with PO, non-invoice matching? This is for invoice amount. It will go to for approval group. It will go for supervisory. There are a lot of business requirements, and it's different from organization to organization. So by the end, you have to test first, after that upload, after that try and test an instance. After that, once you got everything is okay, you can go to apply the same in production. The point to consider, we talk about this later. So there are some business cases. For example, if how can navigate amount credit memo evaluated in the same rules. So in this case is that how to build or how to create rules based on negative amount. It's like just create a condition that evaluates between negative and positive. For examples, you have to select invoice header conditions and put invoice amount between negative, for example, 1000 and 1000. It means between this and this. And also you can put here instead of 1000 between minus or negative 1000 and 0. It means from 0 until negative 1000. How can administrators access transaction console for payable? What is the transaction console? Now I make an invoice. I need to check the status because the business user after that come back to me. This is invoice not went to my supervisors. It not went to the finance manager. It not went to the approval group, whatever. So how to track as a business or as a Oracle consultant, how to track the EB invoice, also GL journals, also PO procurement like purchase order, purchase requisitions, also GL general journals through transaction console. But before of that, you have to enable specific option. Let's come back to setup and maintenance. Just select financial, go to change feature opt on to allow the administrators to track the transactions through transaction console. Just click change feature opt in and select financial features, and you will find down, go to down, you will find workflow transaction console. Just click on the pencil and enable EB invoice approval, expense approval, journal approval, hold payment approval, account coding, lease approval. So it means that you can track the approval of all of these transactions through transaction console, either all, or you can select a specific. For example, if you enable the approval for the payment, you can come back here to allow this checkbox, account coding for payable invoice, lease approvals. It means it will give you the actions to track all of these invoices through transaction console. Save and close. We already select invoice approval before. After that, you can go to the tools and the transaction console to track the status of the invoices, of the expense approval, journal GL, lease payments approval, blah blah blah. Done. And now I will try to track this invoice or PO, procurement, purchasing, requisition. Just go to tools, go to down tools, you will find transaction console. This transaction console, just click on it. It will give you the search criteria either by status. This is journal approval, it's filled. You can select by status, which is filled. You can select the transaction from date range 3 months ago, 6 months, whatever. In progress, if you select in progress, this is my invoice. If you remember, invoice approval 1 is submitted by whom, whatever. If you click on it, it is in progress. In progress with assign the supervisor of what of these. This is my users, which is the submitter of the creators. Either error or whatever, it means that there is no supervisor is defined for my users. So you can also follow or track the invoice here. Whatever is filled, this is my invoice is failed because the system will find that rule set because supervisory what doesn't exist for my users. So again, I will assign my supervisor to my users, and again I can resubmit, withdraw the invoice and again resubmit it again without any problems. In case of you stuck, submitted, completed, all of these things you can search here. For all of the in progress, here all of the invoices, all of the transaction type, as you see here, this is the invoice, AB invoice approval, here is the requisition approval, GL journal approval. So from transaction console, depends on opt-in features, you can follow or track the status of the transactions, because it's very helpful tools for consultant to support the business users to track the status of the approval of the transactions. Let's come back to the slides. This is what we told you before, change opt-in, blah blah blah. Again, administrator can only now access the workflow transaction consoles for payable invoice, again by navigating tools, transaction console. Is it possible to approve payable invoice in batch? Currently, there is no batch approval process like there is with invoice validations. There is, I think, a bug or enhancement request is raised that invoice approval at invoice batch levels. Why invoice doesn't appear in transaction console even if it failed in invoice approval due to some errors? The users initiating the approval process should have the employee rule assigned. Again, now you submit invoice, you must track it through transaction console. Even if failed, in stuck, in progress, completed, whatever, but when you go to transaction console, you didn't find this, or this invoice doesn't appear there, because what the initiating the approval process should have the employee rule assigned as a rule, or you can take a copy from employee and create your custom and also assign it to the users. Approval by multiple selection on the manage invoice as a user interface of account payables. How to approve multiple invoices at the same time in manage invoice user interface solutions. In the approval info tile pending, it won't allow to select multiple invoice, therefore is not possible from user interface. There is one checkbox to just select the row 1 and hold the control button and select row 2, row 3, but it will not allow you to approve a multiple selection of AB invoices. workaround is to approve multiple invoices from what? PPM work list. But in this case, you have to give the users or the finance manager, whatever, to allow him to go to BPM work list. From BPM work list, he can select a lot of invoices and take one action by one time. What is the action available for the approvals? Approved, reject, delegate, request more information. Request more information like attachment, bank account, invoice, hard copy, like these cases. How to exclude approval for invoices imported from specific source. You can skip invoice approval for certain invoices based on their source. That in this case you can just navigate to the manage standard lookup. You can create a lookup type like AB underscore skip underscore show approvals with the meaning and descriptions set to setting invoices as auto approved, and the module set to be payable. After that, you can go to manage payables lookups, conduct search for the lookup AB skip show approvals, and create lookup code with the value same as a payable lookup code values such as spreadsheets. Again, just go to setup and maintenance, search for manage standard lookups, lookup, I can also go to global search, manage standard lookup, manage standard lookups, create lookup type as EB here, lookup type create as EP skip underscore show underscore approval, and with the meaning and description set to setting invoices as auto approved. Here is the meaning: setting invoices as auto approved. Again, take it, copy in description. Module payables, right? Just click on search, payables application, save and close. Okay, and go to manage payables lookups, manage payable lookups, search for this one, whatever we defined before, EB skip SOA, this one, and define the lookup code. Just add lookup code. We said before that create lookup code with the value same as payables lookup code value, such as I will enter spreadsheet, for example. And what is the reference data set? Is there a specific reference display sequence enabled, and enter any meaning. So again, these values must match the result you see on the manage payables lookup page when lookup type is source and user module name is payables. This is how to exclude approval for invoice imported from a specific source. If you make any integrations with any third party or legacy systems, whatever, and you need to exclude the approvals. Just do like this. What else we have? Account payable invoice approval attachments are not coming through on approval notification or in manage invoices. The case is after attaching a document to an invoice during the invoice approval process, attachment or more than one attachment are not coming through on PPM notification in invoice manage. What are the steps required to take document attached by the approval appear with the invoice? In this case, I submit the invoice. It went to the supervisor, it went to the finance manager, whatever. In case of this finance manager need to make attachments, he already attached whatever the documents, and again he approve. But I didn't find this attachment, or this attachment is missing or not coming. So where is the problem? Solution that you must explicitly select save after adding an attachment on notifications. I received the notifications, I adding the attachment, I save before proceeding with approve or reject. What is the action plan? Create new invoice, initiate approval, login as approval, open notifications. On comment section, click add a comment. On attachment section, click add and add a file from a desktop. Go to actions, click and save. We need to commit the file. You need to commit the file. Now we open notification from PPM notification, approve or reject as desired. This is then login as the invoice creator and check the approval reject notification and check if you can access both the comments as well as the attachment. This is the action plan. Thanks for watching.